Today here on Biblicia.com, we have the immense privilege of having Pastor Reno Zunz join me for a talk. Now, Reno is the real deal. Reno has been a pastor for 40 years. He's still a faithful minister and shepherd at our church and is really known around the church as the heart of the church. He is a faithful laborer, brother, and mentor, teacher to so many, and has been an immense blessing and mentor in my time, in my life, coming to the church that he's been a pastor in for decades, me coming there new. And I wanted to talk to Reno today just about how the world, the culture, the church has changed from his perspective and his lifetime. Get some of the insight, wisdom from him on different subjects, books he recommends, and just learn about him, his story, his background, and talk through some subjects here that'll help us today as Christians seeking to live out the gospel in our context, ways that insights, wisdom that'll help us to do that great work. And I pray that it's a blessing to you, that you would hear Pastor Reno out. He is well worth listening to, and I'm sure you'll see that as we dialogue through this talk today. Pastor Reno Zunz, thank you for joining us today. It is such an honor to have you on, and I've been wanting to do this now for at least 6 months to have you on, as I've gotten to Idlewild Baptist Church, where you were the pastor for member care and engagement was the last job that you held. And tell us again how long you were there.
Well, a little over 40 years so back in February 1984 is when I started at Idlewild on staff. Done various different things over the years, obviously, as the staff and church has grown. So a little bit of a jack of all trades there for sure. So.
Yeah, the membership roles. I mean, the church is built, its size makes it the third, I think, largest church in Florida. But it's been around for 100 years, roughly a little under that, like 98 years.
Plus year, yeah.
Yeah, is the number where it started in a garage, somewhere in the greater Tampa area. And so you were there for a long time. Tell us about you, where you're from, your background, your experience. Take some time. I want everybody to know who you are.
Right. Well, I was, born in St. Petersburg, Florida. So coming back to Tampa 40 years ago, after I graduated from seminary in Memphis, was really kind of like coming back home in some ways. I was a newlywed. My wife Sherry and I were married. We were married in December, and I came in February. So just a couple months of marriage, So before we came down here as newlyweds to on staff, and I knew. So growing up in St. Petersburg. Mom was Lutheran background. Dad was kind of maybe his parents went to the Christian church some, but really didn't have any church affiliation to speak of. They got divorced when I was about 7. Dad moved away. I lived with Mom. Mom got remarried when I was about 12. I'll go through very quickly. She actually married a fellow that from the South who was actually had been a Baptist, but had gone through a divorce. Very hurt in the church, that one of those things, Joseph, where he was, very bitter and didn't come back to the Lord till he had brain cancer at age 51, which brought him back to the Lord before he passed away. So a little bit of Baptist church in there, but mostly nothing. And even through high school, amazingly, that I could be in the Bible Belt, and I don't recall anybody in my high school years sharing the gospel with me at all, which is kind of odd, isn't it? You think about that.
That's part of what I want to talk to you about today. I would think that was really odd.
Yeah. So went up to Georgia Tech because I was in state, good at math and science. Went to Tech and got a degree there. It was really after I graduated, working in the computer center, that a friend, a Christian friend, invited me to come to church, and I went to First Baptist Church of Atlanta. Dr. Charles Stanley, of course, most everybody's heard of him. Passed away now last year. Yeah. He was the pastor. It was still in Midtown Atlanta at that point before they moved north. And so I went there. I was in walking distance of the church in those days. And I worked in the computer center and got very involved in the church. and then felt a couple years later a call toward vocational ministry to get out of the computer science realm, which was my degree. I was a computer programmer, and go to seminary in Memphis, Tennessee. And so that's where I met my wife, where I met and the pastor of Idlewild when I joined, he became my roommate. And he married Adrian Rogers' daughter. Adrian Rogers, the longtime pastor of Bellevue Baptist Church in Memphis, where I was a member. And so he came as a very young man down to Idlewild to be the pastor. And he called me a couple months later to come join him. And that's how I got to Idlewild 40 years later. Now, his tenure there lasted about 5 years, had a moral failure, actually. And that was a pretty tumultuous time in the church. We were in high school at that point in time, building a building, or actually just presenting the plans for a $7 million building at that point in time, which was a lot of money, still is.
Still is, yeah.
But so the church kind of hung together, and not kind of, they did hang together, by the grace of God, and we got through that time, and called Ken Whitten, who I knew back from Bellevue, would work with him, and turned out he was pastor for 33 years, and led the church as it became larger and larger over those years. So that's kind of a nutshell. But yeah, we had a couple different moves, being in the high school and 2 relocations and all that kind of stuff. This wearying, lots of meetings.
So, so St. Pete was where you started, and then you came back to Tampa, though. I didn't know that. I thought you were from somewhere else outside of Florida. And then,
there's a member of Idlewild. I met with him and his wife about maybe just a couple weeks before I retired. And they just wanted to come meet me, and they're thinking about joining the church. They've been attending well for. Turns out he was born 22 days before me in the same hospital in St. Petersburg, which of course no longer exists. That was kind of crazy, isn't it? A guy that you were born 22 days before I was in the same hospital. So small world, right?
Great stuff. Yeah, small world. So your pastoral education, your training was in Memphis. At where you went to? I know you said Georgia Tech for like the business, the computers. Where was the seminary at for you?
Mid-America Baptist Theological Seminary, Memphis, Tennessee. They were Southern Baptists, but they weren't. That was back in the days. Joseph, you probably remember historically there with the Southern Baptist wars for the denomination. Where was it going to go more conservative, Bible-based, or was it going to go more, we call liberal theologically? And so
that's in the early 80s. That's in the early 80s.
Yeah, exactly. The 70s and 80s, the late 70s.
Yeah, sure.
So Mid-America was Southern Baptist, but they weren't supported by the convention, because the convention only supported the 7 official Southern Baptist seminaries. And the president was very Southern Baptist, and if a speaker got up and talked negatively about the Southern Baptist Convention at all, he got the hook right away from the. So in other words, they weren't there to stir up controversy. They were there for it because they wanted an evangelical, obviously, a biblical view of inerrancy seminary option for folks that were going to these other Southern Baptist seminaries who did not find that, but that has all changed now, so by the grace of God again. So,
I remember. Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, actually, I had a history professor, Reginald Barnard. He was from Australia, went to Spurgeon's College, and just an amazing guy, older man. And the church history, as you know, I'm sure you probably enjoyed it, but I mean, it was double columned textbook, dates and names in every paragraph, right? I mean, just like, oh my, going to explode your brain. And so I went in to see him one time, asked him a question, and he asked me where I got my biblical training in Bible college. And I said, well, I went to Georgia Tech. He goes, well, what are you doing here then? Because in his mind, his view, seminary was the kind of refining what you learned in Bible college. That was probably the traditional view. I didn't know that. And so he said, "What are you doing here?" And I said, "Well," and I basically was pretty deflated at that point in time. Now I ended up doing well in his class, and he came back and kind of commended me for that. It made me study harder, but that the idea of coming out of a Institute of Technology and going straight to seminary was kind of a little bit of a different approach. That, and as I look at it now, but I was older, in my older 20s, and so didn't want to go back to for another. But again, you could understand why he felt that way. Like, wait a minute, you're supposed to learn a lot of these things in Bible college, right? That was the idea back, I think. Yeah. So.
Well, I had a similar thing. Like I start a PhD in a month from now, a little less, like exactly a month from now. And,
Congratulations.
Yeah. Well, I'm looking forward to it a lot. But, I started with a business and computers degree, my undergrad. And then, God called me into ministry, putting chaplaincy as sort of my goal for that ministry, missionary work, I call it. And I pursued that for 10 years before I got it, for almost 7 years, and then retired out of that. But if somebody had asked me the same question, I would have said, yeah, I was at undergrad studying business and computers, a year, 2 years before before now. And I'd have the same
now
thing.
You look at it, Joseph, a business degree for a pastor is not a bad start.
Well, I could
need to get your Bible. I get it. But, we got pastors who that are pretty never, we won't go. We don't even talk about that.
Well, and especially in a church like Idlewild, which has 16,000 members on the rolls and so many things going on and trips. There's systems and there's efficiencies and there's processes that a business degree does not hurt to have somewhere in there. And I can tell you literally yesterday how I saw that work in the job where I'm now full-time on staff there, not in a pastoral role, but working with pastors, how that training has directly, literally a guy looked at me yesterday and said, "So you're trying to make my job easier?" And then laughed because I said, "Yes, I'm trying to free up so much here to help do the work that you're called to do." And it was great. And so really yeah.
And we're always learning, theologically anyway. Yes, we need to be always students of the word, and there's so much, material out there for us to digest. That business degree, that'll be great. That will really pay great dividends, so to speak, in your ministry. It really will, Joseph. So that's great.
Well, the PhD is in biblical exposition, so it's not business.
There you go.
I'm hoping to use that for sure. But no, I hear you.
That'll be more fun.
Yeah. So how many years was it for you then? And Adrian Rogers, the best preacher voice maybe in history. He had that voice that when I hear him speak, it's just he's got that great tone and just a wonderful legacy of his work there. How many years then were you there doing the seminary and doing the training again?
Probably about 3 to 4 years, I guess. Okay. 4 years, probably. Yeah.
Okay. And then that's when you came to Florida, called by this other pastor that you mentioned. And
I was ordained there on a Wednesday night service. In February 15th, 1984, right after we were married. Sherry and I were, and we packed the car up and came and started Idlewild that Sunday on February the 19th, 1984. Adrian Rogers is gracious as, we have a little pre-meeting with him, and then we come in and he preached a sermon, and then at the end they laid hands on me, and he had Sherry and I stand at the front. And said, now this young couple's going to Tampa. Of course, his son-in-law was the pastor, so he had a vested interest in certainly us going down there. Hey, you might go shake their hands, congratulate them, and maybe slip them something in their hand. And people would walk by and put money in my hand while they're shaking my hand. So I stick it in my pocket. I had a suit on, I think I had $400 in cash stuffed in my pockets, which,
nice.
We opened a bank account as a young couple when we got to Tampa. That was God's provision for us, I believe.
I think we need to bring that back as a third ordinance.
There you go.
That didn't happen when I was ordained, which was only in 2010. Nobody gave me any money.
I know it was a little awkward, but hey, it was a blessing for sure.
Well,
Yeah.
they knew you were moving. They knew you had those
Right,
expenses and
right.
everything coming.
Yeah.
Yeah, but no, that's great. I've not seen that before, but what a blessing that is. So okay, so I see it. So Georgia Tech, a little. You were in St. Pete. You got there to study school. You finished school. You had the call to ministry. By then, went to Tennessee, Mid America. You went from Charles Stanley again. Great legacy, great ministry
Mm,
for Dr.
right.
Stanley. And then over to with Pastor Rogers for 3 4 years, and then that call through those God had put in your life to Florida and at Idlewild Baptist Church from then.
Right,
And you're
right.
still teaching
Yeah,
there today.
two pretty good pastors to start out with, right? Yeah, wow. Just think of
Yeah,
that's amazing, isn't it? Yeah, the ministry they had for
yeah. So let
millions
me
of people, literally.
Yeah, so let me ask you this. Most influential top 3 books that you've read in your life. It's hard, I know, but if you had to say top 3, and then I'm going to ask you what is the number 1 of them you'd recommend any Christian read and maybe why? Go. What is your 3 most influential
Yeah,
books?
yeah. I mean, probably just kind of go in some sort of semblance of where there's others. Obviously, we were given a book. I worked in the seminary bookstore part time when I was in seminary. So the bookstore manager, Sue Forrester, who probably is with the Lord now, gave me a book for our wedding, right? And gave me a book called The Marriage Builder by Larry Crabb. I don't think it's in print anymore.
Okay.
And that and Larry Crabb's a little over my head sometimes, which some of his. But that book was very practical for both Sherry and me as we got married. Very, very just a solid, almost a doctrinal look at marriage and practical as well.
Interesting.
So
Okay.
kind of going back there over the years, I think one of my favorites has been just over the years a book called The Saving Life of Christ by Major Ian Thomas. Just connects the Old and the New Testament. So I just love that book. Reread it, a lot. Just you
Okay.
can take a story in the Old Testament and bring New Testament in. And of course, the whole point is that from Romans 5:10, whereas we've been justified through the death of His Son, we've been not only that we've been saved by His life, and the saving life of Christ comes from that Romans 5:10 verse there. And then probably most recently, something we use at church quite a bit is called "Designed to Lead." Um, 2 authors there. One of
Hmm.
them is Eric Geiger, and then the other one is a former pastor out of San Antonio. But that's a book we've used quite a bit. You'll hear new terminology as obviously on staff there at Idlewild quite a bit about convictions and the culture of the church and the constructs. Um, and leadership discipleship. The leadership development is discipleship, and I mean it's really two sides of the same coin, isn't it? So
Yeah.
that's been I've really enjoyed that book and used it quite a bit over these past several years. So just a few of those, yeah, as I'm thinking about that. So
Yeah, it's hard to narrow down, but for some
right,
people, maybe it's not. Maybe they'd say, "Hey, this book," and
yeah,
of course,
yeah,
you
for
you
sure,
didn't
yeah.
cheat and you didn't say the Bible, which I appreciate because I didn't say you can't say the Bible
That would be
because
the number one book, though. There
that's the
you go.
given. Amen. But she didn't cheat with that one. But some people say, "Man, this book really just rocked me," or this even essay, or this thing, or for me,
Things like the normal Christian life way back when during seminary days, that was a Watchman Nee book. There's some books like that over the years that certainly I think helped, but then, this is over a long period of time. I wouldn't say I keep going back to that, but I
yeah,
remember back in those days, kind of it's a long journey, isn't it? Even the whole experiencing God, study by Henry Blackaby
Blackaby.
was helpful, to think about how God works in your life. And it's obviously unique to every one of us. Your story, which is very interesting, how God has brought you to this point. It's unique for everyone, but
Now,
God is,
yeah.
so
Well, at least I can say there's one I've read that you recommended because unfortunately I hadn't read The Marriage Builder, The Saving Life of Christ, or Designed to Lead. But what's interesting is I wanted to share this in response that some of the more influential books in my life, 2 of at least 3, are on the same categories. Where John Piper wrote a book called This Momentary Marriage, that is on marriage, and I've
Wow.
used it more in counseling than anything. And it is
Interesting.
a
I've not read that one. Yeah.
Yep, it's a so similar to The Marriage Builder by Larry Crabb. This book really was just foundational for me in a
Mm.
lot of ways, and I've shared it so often. There's another book called The Knowing Jesus in the Old Testament by Christopher J.H. Wright, that
Mm.
similar to The Saving Life of Christ, Major Ian Thomas, that you said, really just seeks Christ, as the title gives away, in the Old Testament, but his life and how the writers viewed Jesus, or the New Testament writers see Jesus in all of the Old Covenant, and Matthew brings it out, and this
Mm.
Christopher J.H. Wright goes to great lengths to do it. It really, in seminary, this is one of the books I read. It
Uh,
really rocked me in wonderful ways.
cool.
And then, oddly enough, I'm starting a class next month at Idlewild where we're using the books. I have a meeting with a guy at 3:30 after we're done here at a Panera Bread to look at Jordan Rayner. You familiar with
Uh-huh.
Jordan Rayner?
Yeah, I know Jordan. Uh-huh.
Yeah, you probably know him. I know he's here at Idlewild. I've reached out to him. He's going to give us a few video minutes at least for the class that we're teaching. But I've got one of his books right here and two more. One Called to Create, that is
Mm-hmm.
similar to Designed to Lead by Eric Geiger and this other author you mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just read that book. I'm not even done with it. I'm like 15 pages from the end. And it is just a phenomenal book. So even in my own life, three very similar books, even the ones you shared when I asked you the question about the top three books, God is using as well. And I've read Experiencing God. Now, but if I take a guess, or let me ask, would you say that The Saving Life of Christ would be the one book you'd recommend anybody watching this to
Yeah,
outside the Bible to read?
it's a pretty easy read. Now because he's an older author, one of the Keswick authors, that comes out of the England there, he would
Okay.
have a lot of biblical quotes would be in the King James version, but very, very easy to read and very interesting. Now, interesting, Jordan Rayner married an Ottawa girl that, so you'll know something at 3:30. He married the daughter of someone that was very prominent last night. In fact, who directed the whole thing last night. He married Sheila
Sheila.
Goski's daughter. Yeah, so now you know something about Jordan Rayner. There you go. So
Okay, interesting. Yeah, I've
stepdaughter
really been
Kara.
enjoying the book, and we're going to
Yeah,
talk in that class about,
right.
just that what you do for a living. If you're making disciples, if you're living the Christian life, is exactly the ministry to which God's called you, and that is a sacred work.
That's the design to lead. It would say that the church
Yeah,
should be, it used the word LOCUS, locus. The church should be a leadership locus that whatever, career path or vocation you're in, the principles of servant leadership, the biblical principles of leadership will, with nuances, 80% or more, if not more, will transfer to what field you're in, right? And that's the whole idea behind it, for sure.
amen.
Yeah,
And I'm also
yeah.
reading Paul Tripp's book, Lead. It's over here. So
That's a good one. I thought and
yeah,
as I was thinking about that question, I thought about anything that Paul Tripp writes would be on that list. The latest
he's
one I've
yeah,
listened to was Instruments in a Redeemer's Hands,
yeah. I've read
which
that
is
one.
really good. Yeah, but Lead was a really thought-provoking book.
I
Yeah,
think
I
I'm
need
about
to read
halfway
it.
through it, and I'm
Yeah.
reading The Trellis and the Vine, which is one that Edgar gave me. That's open
Uh-huh.
here
That's
on
a
the
good one.
desk right now. So I
Yeah,
like reading
Paul,
more than one book at once.
we put the Paul David Tripp, the first one we did as a staff several years ago was Dangerous Calling.
Read that
And
one.
that
Yeah.
was a pretty powerful book too. Yeah, yeah.
Great
So
book.
there
So,
we
so we're going through a
go.
lot of great books,
Yeah.
and my personal, just to throw it out for my guys that'll watch this or folks that know me a little better, I would say if there was one book that I'd recommend anybody read, it would be The Gospel According to Jesus by John MacArthur.
Mm,
That book is written at a time that you mentioned earlier with the
mm.
non-lordship salvation 1980s you were talking about in the Southern Baptist
Yep,
world, and some of
definitely.
the liberalization maybe of certain things, not exactly on the same subject, but written around the same time. And just it does such a great job of outlining the gospel, but also bringing in so much historic attestation to the gospel that you really get a sense that what MacArthur's saying is
Mm,
nothing new. And
right.
and I
And
pride
it shouldn't
myself
have
that I
been
have nothing new to
yeah,
say to anybody about Jesus,
right.
really.
it shouldn't have been controversial, but
Yeah.
it's amazing, isn't it? Because just the Bible. But yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, you're right. I do recall a lot of those, even you know, cafeteria conversations at seminary about things like that. Right. So
Yeah.
there you go. Yeah.
Thank you for that. Now I'm going to read the book. I'm going to look at the Saving Life of Christ, if not all
Well,
three that you
I'm sure I have a
recommended.
copy here somewhere for you. There you go. So
Well, if I get it, from you, that's even better. But I have an asterisk by it on my notes. So, what is now? Now you're a pastor, and you have been a pastor for again. That's where God's called you to be. So, for anybody listening to this that is seeking pastoral, that aspires to the office of overseer, which Paul writes and says is a good thing. If anybody aspires, it's a good thing, and we want that. Give us a valuable piece of information for men seeking pastoral ministry. Just one.
well, yeah, there's the preparation is important. I'm not sure that I would say I did it the right way at all. I would think probably now 40 years later, looking, I wish I'd have known that 40 years ago. Of course, we all can say that in many different ways, but
Yeah.
but so I think preparation and not rushing into things is the best way to, and really probably. Uh, Even though I did have a few folks at First Baptist Atlanta that did give me some advice, I think finding a mentor in
Mm,
the ministry is yeah, there was one young man that took me on. It was a little bit older than me. That was kind of ahead of me in that calling, and that helped quite a bit. So I think that would it'd be a wise move for anyone considering that to find a little older mentor, maybe not that far down the road, but just someone that they really could take them on and just help walk them through it. I think would be my best advice. So.
yeah, and that's not one that I expected you to say. I'm really glad to hear it. I mean, I didn't have any expectations of what you would say, but to hear you say find a mentor, somebody that can walk you through that. I don't think that's advice that a lot of guys in their 20s are getting. I think that
Mm,
there's a lot of advice that they get, which is good advice. We'd agree it's part of the
sure.
preparation, like you said, but study your Bible, read your Bible, do
Yeah,
that
of
work,
course. Yeah.
of course, is the work. But presuming that that is the standard for us all to really prepare for pastoral ministry, to get a mentor is great advice, and just not something I think many people are hearing.
Yeah, well, and we know as men how important that is, and it's hard for us guys to find to be that close to someone that we can not only encourage us but rebuke us if we need to be rebuked too. That's a hard thing it's a hard thing for me, I know. So for a lot of us it is. So
Well,
yeah.
and I'll be honest, Pastor, that is something where I've noticed a deficiency in my own apologetics and work. Is I have kind of I honestly believe this, and it's still something that the Holy Spirit is working in my life and correcting and changing. Is that I didn't have mentors. I didn't
Mhm.
have that, and so here I am, 22 years into my Christian journey, if you will, and where God's had me sort of in the army or outside the camp of seminaries. My seminary was done in Iraq and Afghanistan,
Right, right.
Georgia and Louisiana, and I'm seeking the Lord in this very cloistered other world. It's a deficiency in character where I don't have the kind of like I can push people over, but maybe not let them know I want to catch them at the same time, like that I really love them. And I think I honestly can say that that's something I hope all young men have, is that strength in conviction, but also I think it just comes with mentorship and years and experience, that real, doing it all in love.
Yeah, that's a great. Oh, yeah, perfect. Wow, wow.
So, I
You
mean, I'm
said it.
looking,
That's a
I'm,
good thing to learn. Yeah, and because I'm sure that I obviously I could just not knowing you that well, but knowing that obviously you're a courageous guy. You're not afraid, but people I've got to know you a little bit. I see how caring you are. Other people may not be able to see that at first blush. I don't know. So
yeah.
yeah, that's a good thing. Yeah.
And it's also why I got out of the army to get into full-time ministry in the church, is so that people can see that love for the church, more, because yeah, you don't see it in apologetics the same, which is so much of what people do these days. It's a lot of online. You don't even meet the people that you're debating with. and it's maybe some of the things we'll look at today. What we're saying here about mentorship and how it shapes people for good in ministry or in life in general. Like we're gonna see how this plays out through everything we
Mm.
discussed today. Yeah.
Interesting, and studying a little bit. Actually, I have a fellow student in the class, the men's class I teach on Sunday, who's teaching this Sunday on Hebrews 5. But in Hebrews 5, just going, studying it some for myself, so I can be prepared and get just in case. But it talks about the high priest. In Hebrews 5, it started at the end of chapter 4, but it says they have to be a man. They're human. And then it said they have to be compassionate and caring. And then it said they
Amen.
have to be called. And then it takes, that's like A, B, C. Then it says, but and Jesus was called, there's C. He was compassionate, and he was a man, he was human. He was tempted at all points, such as without sin. So interesting that, of
Yeah.
course, basically, the writer of Hebrews basically saying Jesus had all the qualifications for a high priest, even though he was not from the line of Aaron. Obviously, he was from Melchizedek was the high priest we're talking about there, which he didn't bring it. He mentions Melchizedek there, but then comes back to him in chapter 7,
Right.
and really explains more thoroughly. So interesting, isn't it? Yeah,
Yeah.
and so I would think pastors, although we're certainly that's a different role than the priest is in a sense, but yes, we have to be caring and compassionate and
Yeah.
called, and certainly we're human. We got that part
Yeah.
down pat. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
So
so
it's the experience outside of the textbook. It's the experience
mm,
outside of even the prayer room and the prayer closet that makes a pastor or a good disciple
interaction with
maker.
people.
Yeah, and I
Yeah,
certainly
yeah.
had that in chaplaincy or in, the
Mm,
churches we've been in and works, but it's something different about being in a local church for a long time or being mentored or having it that is just great advice. So if I could take the next 1 minute that you're about to say, a video snippet, cut it out of this wider talk and fax it back to a desktop or a table in your apartment in 1975, 1980. What's one other piece of advice that you would give to young Reno to say, here's what you need to know about ministry and life?
Well, of course, in '75, I need to know Jesus. I didn't
I was
really get saved until after that. But
okay.
I graduated from college in '75. Well, what one piece of information I would like for folks, young folks, to it called the
No,
ministry to get to know?
if you were to say it to you in your life and look back
Say
and
it to
say,
me.
yeah, this is one thing, and then you could pick it up and watch it in this fantasy question I've
Yeah,
got. What might it be?
yeah. I mean, I took that advice to heart that the our seminary professor gave to me. Um, I probably wasn't as prepared uh, biblically as I needed to be, and probably needed a little more time. Maybe rushed that a little bit, got impatient. Um, I think in my own life now, God worked it out. Obviously, He works these things together for good. Just reading through Romans 8 again today, and so certainly I was called, but I probably would say, you know, you know slow down, again, get a lot of advice from others, and don't rush into anything. But I was pretty it's still pretty young spiritually at that point. It wasn't really, I hadn't been a long time Christian, um uh so I wouldn't certainly wouldn't recommend the pathway I took being the pathway someone that maybe has been raised in church and understands. They might take it a little differently, but that wasn't the case with me, so
Yeah.
it was pretty new for me. So
So I'm hearing the recurring theme there of mentorship, preparation, where you might say in that what you just said, if I summarized it, is when you're making decisions, the Word of God, you're in prayer, seek godly counsel
yeah, yeah. I
on
mean,
your
again, I guess
decisions.
it depends on where the person's at in this process, because
Yeah,
even like you said, you got a business degree. Um, I have met pastors over the years, and certainly, you know, um, who never worked in any other job outside of the ministry. Um, I don't think that's generally has been a good good thing, you know.
Mm, mm.
So
I hear you.
I think it's for a guy now. We're guys and men are
Mm.
pastors. I think it's good for us to work, you know, and just get an idea of how you're if you're going to have a congregation or be in a ministry in the congregation, I talk to guys who never had another job. They come right out of seminary. And so
Yeah.
I think that life experience is I'm not saying you got a 10, 20 years of work. I'm saying the life experience is important too in the ministry. And if you really can identify with what folks are day to day, week to week going
Mm.
through that you're working with, right? So
Or we could say then to those guys watching this, maybe that, right out of high school knew they wanted a pastor, went to Bible college, for them, meet the guys in your congregation that aren't pastors and try to really get their perspective about what it means to live out their calling, working in an auto shop, working at a
right.
retail store, ask questions and seek to do your ministry to someone would be some
Right.
good advice.
Yeah. That's good. That's a good approach for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I do
Because
think a
some
lot of
guys
these
get
folks.
called differently, and so I want them to hear that same advice, like how they might be able to follow it. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, so these folks are now taking a gap year where they're working for a year, and there's a
Yeah.
lot of options out there now, aren't there? There really are. So yeah.
So part of the reason I want to talk to you is really, it's to everybody in the church, everybody that names the name of Christ. I want them to see this talk with someone with the experience you've got. And I have it in bold. I shared this with you just before we click the record. That my idea, what I want to do is try to get an idea of how we as a people have changed in some categories of thought or by certain influences in your lifetime. You being an American, same culture as me, kind of
Mhm.
thing. If you'd say that we have changed, as a people. So, and give me a minute here just to introduce this, and then I'll give you my, some questions here. But my fear, and I say fear, as a preacher, these days, a Bible teacher wanting to do is just the reality of the fact that I feel God has, in His judgment, really hardened my generation. And I say that in the Second Thessalonians 2 context. To those who will not receive the love of the truth, God sends them strong delusion. They might believe the lie, who took pleasure in unrighteousness, that they might be condemned. I mean, this is what, Scripture speaks of, whether you take that eschatologically only or whether you'd see aspects of that, in any generation leading up to, perhaps end times, in the future. I view it as something certainly possibly applicable in any generation, any city, any people, any time that passage has an applicability. And when I see the insanity of my people, the love of death, the love of anything ungodly, and this is why I say, give me just a minute. What's on my heart here and where I want to take this talk is doing ministry in a people group today. As you know, we go to USF, we do outreach, we go to, I want to do more debate with people in the area to learn about other religious groups and study what we believe as Protestants right alongside other views to understand not only their view, but ours better as a result. I think back to the Exodus. And I
Mhm.
think of God, what He did in the plaguing of Egypt to deliver the Hebrews. And I think if I'm a Hebrew, or excuse me, an Egyptian soldier, and
Mhm.
I've just watched the God of these slaves basically destroy my country. He's mocked our gods. We've all been talking about it for however long these plagues lasted. There's blood everywhere. I just to
Right.
context our hearers. You've got the darkness, you've got the frogs, the lice, the river to blood. You've got all of the plagues that God has done. Where Moses, this crazy dude, has come back and he's preaching,
Mhm.
and they want to take the Hebrews out. And our Pharaoh is in some serious dialogue about this. Apparently, I'm just a guy that works in Egypt, but I'm a soldier in the Egyptian army. I've seen all this. My firstborn is now dead. My son was killed last night. And now my Pharaoh says, let's go get them. So we know that they
Mhm.
left. We're going out after them. Like, as I'm getting in the chariot, as I'm pulling out my sword, as I'm getting in line, something's got to be going on in the mind. Like, thinking, what am I doing? Now, You get to the Red Sea, and a pillar of fire has blocked us all night. And overnight, God has split I believe it was the Gulf of Aqaba. He's split the Red Sea apart. And we can see, can't get to them yet, but we can see through the wadi that they're begun crossing over. They're leaving. And then the fire lifts the next day, and my commander-in-chief says, go get them. Like, who goes to get them? Who doesn't defect from the Egyptian army at this point and go, no, like insane. I'm not going in there after them. That's not a good idea. No, like that's an unlawful order kind of thing, something. All that I'm saying is, to this point, when I look at the insanity and the hatred for God among my people, I fear that they're the Egyptian army, and that God is so hardened their brains and minds toward the gospel that all I can do is keep giving the gospel, the same gospel. But I fear that pretty soon the waters are just going to close on them. They're going to die. Right. So, as a preacher in these days, I just wonder if I'm in a generation that's being so hardened by the Lord. I can't proclaim this as a prophet. I can't say this is what God has done and that I'm in it. So I fear talking and fearing it, saying it, but I do believe it when I see the insane of transgender and abortion and homosexuality, but fornication even more so, and just the hardness of secular thinking toward Jesus. All of this combined is my general 20-year-old at the university. It's just what they believe. 30-year-old. It's what they believe. It is and there's all these things. So I keep imagining that the world is so different when you were my age. Was it? So this is kind of why I want to have a talk with you, and where I want to take our tech questions here.
That was what, 23 years ago then. So, because I think I'm 23 years older than you. They were 24 years older than you. Well, interesting. Yeah. I mean, certainly you even before we started recording, you mentioned the technology, and certainly the World Wide Web and the smartphone is changed, the 24/7 information coming out. And I guess, Joseph, I've been on mission trips, certainly, and not in just the last, I don't think 5 years it's been maybe since I've been on an overseas trip, but been to some places. And, I know, and honestly, it goes, I'm stumbling around a little bit, but it goes, the same professor, that the history professor, actually used to go around our class and basically kind of warn us into Western, not our mindset would get away from Westernized Christianity, putting the context of what we have here in the U.S. or some other, obviously, first world country, rather than somewhere else around the world where there are places around the world right now, they're still, making fires and cooking their food that way. So we're a little bit maybe, because I think, I was looking down a little bit, because I know there's a verse in Ezekiel that talks about the sin of that people, and part of it was being comfortable and having food to eat, and we have grandchildren now. We see they lack for nothing, right? And things of this nature. So I think all that's a part of it. I mean, I think the sin nature is a sin nature. I think you could look and that's the same. And honestly, if you really look back at where the U.S. was when I was a kid, it probably makes sense to where the U.S. is now, because I think people took things for granted even back then, even though it was, right after a war or whatever. But I think that we just had things and just, just took things for granted, took God for granted in a lot of ways. So,
So even what?
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Go.
No, I just wanted to interject. Even what you said. Yeah, no, we'll come right back to you. Even what you said right at the start in your response was helpful, because, I'm looking at ministry in my context, and I think this is where God has called me, and so that's good. But there's a reminder that it isn't, what Christians face around the world necessarily. And that as I take that perspective, even your response was helpful just to remember that. So we do struggle, and I am asking questions about here and now and our culture. But you get outside of this culture and you learn that,
it's the same thing Sherry said to me whenever I kind of jokingly say, "That's first world problem," and Sherry will say, "Well, we're in the first world, so yeah, we got to deal with
Right.
it, right?" Yeah, it
Yeah.
is. We are in the first world. So
Yeah.
first world problems are where we live. We don't have third world problems where we
Right.
live. And that's, so how do we deal? And yeah, I mean, I'm sure you studied more than I have the differences between, I'm a baby boomer, and then of course, Gen X millennials,
Yeah, that's me, Gen
down
X. Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, there's definitely differences, I mean, and of course you probably done some studies, and I did a little bit of study on that just last year with um, our printer suddenly started printing something interesting.
It's future
So
Reno sending you
right next
a
to me.
it's future Reno sending you a message now to say, hey.
So, yeah, so I mean, there's definitely differences. Even when there was one, I think, fellow on the Republican National Convention last night. It was 90, or night before last, maybe a couple of nights ago. Was 98 years old. Is World War II veteran. Going through D-Day there and making it through. So, oh my goodness, what they've seen differences. So,
Right.
yeah, I think we both agree the heart of man is still the same. But different approaches. You're right, and I think the main approach is probably the way it always has been, in a sense of maybe more so because of the skepticism of our general, populace, is that we've got to build relationships, and people have to, know who we are, and know and that we're real before they listen to what we say.
So,
I mean,
so can I ask you a question on that? Because I had this in my notes. I think
mm,
exactly. You just preempted a question. So, would you say that 30 years ago, or more, there was a general?
you froze for just a second. Yeah.
Oh, sorry, am I back?
I said, oh yeah, you froze. I missed a couple words there.
Okay, yeah. I'm having internet troubles at the house. Actually, 2 hours ago, I was on the phone with the internet people again. They got to come out tomorrow, so I'm hoping
Well,
it holds up
that was the first
well.
time. I just missed a couple words.
Sure, sure. I had it in my notes as a question, but would you say, for those of us listening that are my age or younger, that are watching this, that 30 years ago, I'll just take a schwack at a number. I was,
Okay.
17, so let's say 40 years ago, that there would go a little further. So I was, 6 years old. So 40
Mm-hmm.
years ago, was there culturally, is it safe for me to say that people generally viewed preachers like instantly more? You didn't have to like befriend me for an hour before I'd listen to you. Is that, I don't know how to really phrase the
Yeah.
question.
I think the answer is probably yes and no. I think in
Okay.
a person's heart, which you can't really read, I think outwardly the answer would be yes. They were, and still today to some degree, you find people that are respectful of a pastor. Now what
Yeah.
they're really
Yeah.
thinking on the inside might be a whole nother story, right?
Sure.
I don't know they're thinking that way, but so outward respectful people maybe change their language. I've had, many people over the years who still let out four-letter words while they're talking to me, but you could tell some people that probably talk that way normally backed off a little bit of that when they're talking to me. So I think it's probably a yes and no answer. But you're right. Overall, there would be, I think, in the culture a little more respect for the Christian way of life. But that was, that may have been perceived one way and not really that way. Because
Mm.
the cultural Christianity term, whatever that means, you're putting that adjective on that,
Yeah.
has a lot of different nuances, but whatever it is a real thing, and it's been a real thing, right? Where people that say they're Christian, because I may have said I was a Christian before I really was, because, well, I'm not Jewish, I'm not this, I'm not that. I would label myself that way, right? In
Yeah.
the general speaking. Does that make sense?
It does. And there's a yes and a no to your answer, but the fact that there's some yes kind of leads me to believe that it was true, that, I'm hearing from you, and we're
Yeah.
speaking in generalities here, but culture was just different. And I'm tempted to think nowadays, nah, it really wasn't, like everybody was always skeptical. Everybody was always, where we are today. And so but here's the thing. Okay, so when I hearing what you're saying, all throughout history, wars and famines and things change people.
Mhm.
They just change cultures. They change everything. I mean, people literally disappear in war, and the men are gone, and so everything changes, and regimes change, and kingdoms shift, and rise and fall, and all of these things. Economics changes people, and up and through really my generation, up through
Mhm.
my generation, before after your generation, the world changed slower. And
Right.
now, with the advent of technology, we are in an age where you can't information, they say, doubles on the web every, I think, 72 hours, right?
Wow.
And so, if you go back 500 years ago, obviously way before either of us, the world things would change based on, like what we mentioned, wars and famines, economics, weather, things
Mhm.
like that would change a people locally.
Right.
But what I'm wondering and hearing from you is really that there's something new that's come in, where it's the softness of the age in which we live. Here we are having this talk. We're only about 25 miles apart right now, but we're on the internet, and
Right.
I've got lights, and we got cameras, and we got action, and we're able to have this talk, and there's all this wonderful. I got my cold pop right here. I'm going to jump in my car.
Mhm.
I'm going to go to a restaurant and have an interview, talk with a friend in a little bit. What I'm hearing from you, and where we find ourselves today, is that something has really on the world stage, like we've seen Earth now from outside of it. Only when we went to the moon in 1969, kind of thing, humans first saw the Earth from having an Earth rising over the moon. Everything's changed. Now the gospel
Mhm.
hasn't. But really, there's something that our people are shaped by that isn't just war, even though I want to talk a little bit about that here next. It isn't just famines or such like. It's sort of the economic piece where we as Americans live this affluent, amazing life compared. And it's created
Mhm.
a people, I think. Do you think that's fair to say? It's created a
Yeah.
mindset.
Yeah, I think, and certainly education has played into
Yeah,
that. I mean,
sure.
obviously, I'm not old enough to remember the Scopes monkey trial, live, but
1925.
yeah,
Yeah.
but I do remember 1963 taking the Bible out of schools, and then of course 73
Okay.
with Roe v. Wade. Yeah, we used to read the Bible in my elementary school till about the fifth or sixth grade. And have prayer first thing in the morning at public school. And that Pledge of Allegiance, things of this nature. So yeah, it's been a
I did that.
progressive
I
kind
did
of
that
thing. But
growing up.
yeah,
The
yeah,
pledge and the Lord's Prayer when I was
yeah,
growing
yeah,
up in
yeah.
the 80s. We
Right.
were still doing that. Yeah.
So part of it is the indoctrination in schools. And of course, if you're on the college campus, you're going to see that quite a bit, and there's no question about that. We spend a lot of time in classrooms growing up, don't we? So
Yeah.
and if parents are not really teaching their children biblical values and getting prepared for what's ahead, well, you
Part
can understand why this is happening.
part of my
So
conviction in men's ministry and disciple making at our church is to take some of what we're doing at a conference next year and shape specific apologetic, like family-based Bible studies for the men in our church to lead their wives and kids in study. Like I
right,
would love
right,
to format like 6 of them and take 8 months to train them specifically on what they're going to teach on, help them if they've never done it, think through things like how do you get your kids involved, what kind of timeline, so that men are discipling families. Most are probably doing something like that, or many. But to see the education and men take that responsibility
mhm,
is huge, and knowing what their kids are learning in school is a part of that. If they're in a public school, honestly, these days, Reno, I'd say get them out. If they're in a public school, they're just garbage. They're not all created equal, to be fair. They can't be, but,
right,
but
right,
most of it is garbage. The federal education system is really just an indoctrination system that I think is deleterious to everybody. It's not a good thing, but that's sort of a side tangent there. So,
right, right.
I mean, oh, did you want to add something there? Sorry.
No, no, I think you're right on that. Exactly. Yeah, I agree.
And And I know it's hard for people because it is a cost thing and it is a life thing, and so yeah. But we got to work that stuff out as men. We got to figure that
It's a
out.
priority for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. I lived through the birth of the internet and the advent in the late 90s, 2000s of the World Wide Web. So I remember dial up. I remember having a modem and the sounds. That was me at 18, 20 years old, getting my first in the Air Force dormitory where I was living in Tucson, Arizona. I had a room and I got my first home PC and I logged in, and I won't tell you where I went to on the internet at that point because I wasn't a Christian, but I remember getting my first computer at about 21 years old in the home, and that was kind of a new thing. Like that, not many people, it was coming in. So I lived
Mhm.
through that, and I'm part of the last American generation that'll know what it's like not to have one of these things and be reachable in the wood, anywhere I go. I'm that generation. Joey was in the woods. Joey was playing basketball. Joey was gone. You had to find me in the woods and go out.
Right, right, exactly. That was a
So
cute part of the program last night. We saw with the time machine thing. That was
yeah,
pretty cute. But
yeah, I was
yeah,
there. Yeah, I was there. It was
I
very
know. I
cute.
know.
So I lived through that. But I mean, World War II ended in 1945. That's 9 years before you were born. The
Mhm.
Korean War was from 1950 to 1953, which was 1 year before you were born. It ends.
Right.
Vietnam and U.S. involvement in Vietnam. I mean,
Mm.
really, Vietnam's a 20-year, or who knows, who
Yeah,
you talk
right.
to. It went a long time, but U.S. involvement under Kennedy at the end of the 50s, you were 5 years old, begins to step up. And then with President Johnson in the mid 60s, it really ramped up and went through
Right.
1975. You're growing
Mhm.
up in this. You were in your 20s when this is happening
Yeah.
and going
I missed
on.
a draft by 1 year.
Okay.
Again, I'm only second generation going to college in my family. My dad went to college, and so I was expected to go out of high school, had good grades and things, but I got a draft number still. They stopped calling the numbers the year before I graduated from high school in 1970. I think at 71, they did not. I got a number, but they stopped calling
Okay. So my
that
math may
number.
be a
So
little
yeah,
bit ahead there. So you were about 17, 18 at that time.
yep,
Yeah.
yep.
Okay. So I mean, you're living through this and you're seeing it. And I just watched, Rambo 1, where Stallone comes home from the war and he's treated very angrily by a small town, wherever he was. And we see you lived through the aftermath. So I mean, would you say that any of this significantly, like Vietnam era, did it? I want to sound naive, but I don't. Did it change the church and the view of how we did the gospel? Did you see the change in
Well,
the
that see
60s?
that's before I was saved, so
Okay.
I wasn't involved in a church then. Yeah, so yeah, I don't know the answer to that. Good question, because I really didn't become to know the Lord until I was out of college in '75, and so the war would have been over. I'm sure it
Just
did.
ending.
I'm
Okay.
sure it did. I don't no doubt, but I don't have any personal experience with that one to know for sure. Yeah,
Well, let me,
how
well,
that.
kind of, I threw in the church thing and there's questions there specific, but taking that out, would you say it changed American psyche and thinking? It's a foreign war, so it's not war
Right,
on our
right.
own soil, but I mean, 60,000 men die.
Yeah, obviously you look at
Yeah.
these men because their women weren't in combat back. Although we've seen the old movies. There's an old movie channel we can watch here, mostly black and white movies, and they will have nurses back in World War II.
Yeah, Pearl
You'll see
Harbor.
a
Yeah.
couple of
Yeah.
those, but in combat it was men, and lost a lot of men, as you mentioned earlier. And just amazing. Yeah, I mean, I got to admit, Joseph, you're in the military. I have not been in the military, but I'm like, would we ever do that again? I think in my mind, the generation that age now does not have the same stuff that the generation back then
They weren't
had.
playing in the
So
woods for 15 years before you called the draft.
yeah,
Yeah,
so I mean, that's just an opinion, but I
sure.
mean,
No,
so.
an
We, of
opinion that
course,
I have personally
we've had a
spoken to many.
volunteer service. Yeah, we've had volunteer
Yeah.
service now for a long, long time, so we don't even know
Right.
what a draft is anymore. But well, that was way in the past.
So
But yeah, I have my very strong doubts that we could ever do that again. Now if we were invaded, I mean, you look and you see movies too about Pearl Harbor and those things, and then of course we went
yeah,
and stopped Hitler,
nobody's
basically. Yeah,
nobody's
yeah.
nobody's really ready for something like that. It gets thrust on you, and you either rise to it or don't. So yeah, I believe that it would have to be the same tomorrow. But we're certainly a different people. So really, if I say to you, did a simple question then, outside the church, do you think that the Vietnam War changed
Uh,
Americans?
oh yeah, yeah,
Okay,
I do.
because we
And
said that earlier. I said, wars change people, and we said, yeah. And then
yeah.
I'm talking about one here, not on our soil, but throughout. But you're saying, yeah, it changed the way we think about stuff.
hmm Yeah, very. I think we got much more skeptical after that. Of course, we
Okay.
still weren't in the information age we are now, but it started. There were some, but certainly skepticism big time. I mean, Joseph, I mean, growing up, I did trust our leaders. They were telling the truth. Well, they obviously weren't. Probably now we know they're not telling the truth,
No, I
right?
was just going
So
to say, I'm glad we're beyond
yeah,
that because I totally trust everything that I hear now from politicians.
yeah. Oh, I
Yeah.
know you better. You got to.
And I never am
Yeah.
sarcastic ever.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean,
So
yeah. I mean, you can't help but be right.
So really, maybe we could say that because in the same time where you had like this Vietnam, which obviously, if you lived in Vietnam, that war affected them on their soil far more than it does those of us sending troops
Right.
across the world. So in the American culture, of which I'm talking to someone right now that lived through it. It's not very long ago that saw what was going on as a result. Really we are coming back then to this question of affluence and
hmm
a
hmm
different manner of living where, and this, I want to bring in a new factor to talk about whether we're a different people. What did Elvis Presley, the Beatles, the rock and roll, the Stones, the rock and roll generation, which began Jerry Lee Lewis, began Elvis, the 50s, it goes previous, but I mean, nobody can deny that the most influential people in the 60s were the songwriters.
hmm Yeah.
Culturally speaking, I'm not talking in the church. I'm saying like, poets have their influence in time. Writers have their influence. Today, it's directors and filmmakers have this
hmm
amazing cultural influence. So really, in
Right.
this small Western context of our very affluent 1960s, 70s, 80s, the golden age, everybody, capitalism, right? I mean, tear down the wall,
Right.
Mr.
Right.
Gorbachev. We're American first. We're a superpower in the world now for 30 years at that time, really beginning in World War II.
Right.
America rises. We are really the mindset that I'll interact with at our church this week comes from a very specifically crafted, for good and bad, culture. Would you say that our affluence really becomes the main influence? The chain, not the wars. It's the wealth and the ease and the lifestyle.
Yeah. I think so. I mean, I think that's the overall the you know I even thought about it at least once or twice this morning. I was thinking, yeah, it maybe before I got on with you, I said, "Well, Lord, I need to just come to you and say, Lord, help me to know how to, to interact with Joseph today." It's almost a forced thing to, to think about God in our daily lives.
Mm,
Um, Sherry and we're going through a transition now into I don't have a paycheck anymore, from the church. So, changing. Okay, we got together with a friend of ours from the church who's financial advisor yesterday and looking and okay, Lord. And so you think about God in times like that, but it's, as we go through our daily lives, I think you're right. We don't consider overall God in ever present
mm,
in and I think it's just we kind of put God out here and we're here and there's a gap. It's the man upstairs or whatever. I'm not saying
Hmm.
we say that, but of course, kind of the general idea. Yeah, I think affluence and I was kind of looking down trying to find that verse in Ezekiel, and I should have my Bible close by, but looking on my phone, it wasn't as easy. But there's a book about the times there in a part of Ezekiel's prophecy where it talks about abundance of food and type of, and I got to admit the word comfortable, I learned to dislike that word a lot during COVID
Mm.
because that's all we heard, right? Oh, you got to be comfortable. I'm like, where is that in the Bible? Yeah, so
Mm.
I'm saying, yeah, I got to dislike that word. Now I like it's sitting in a comfortable chair or whatever too. I get but during COVID we got to hear, and I was like, man, I don't know that we're all to be comfortable, right?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
I
there we go.
I put in
Oh, did you
abundance.
find it?
Well, I put it in
There you
abundance
go. Good job, man.
in Ezekiel.
Uh,
I don't know if this is the verses you're looking at. You can see this
oh,
in
let's see.
because of the
Yeah, let's
abundance,
see.
you know, all
Let's
of
see.
I'm reading the New American
Uh,
Standard here is what I have up. So,
right, right. Yeah, it would be New Mexico Standard, but I don't. Yeah, it'd be interesting how that. Yeah, you're still
I mean,
going.
I mean, it's
Hooray.
certainly
Yeah,
a yeah. Here we even have
I
we
don't
believe
recognize the verse yet, but
yeah.
okay. It
Well,
could. I'm trying to think what else would be in there. I did. Yeah, yeah. It's great to. Yeah, Bible Gateway is good for looking at words like that.
yeah. Well, again, I just thought we
I'll
might stumble on
find
it,
it.
but it's a
I'll find
recurring
it.
theme in the
Um,
text where abundance, did something
mm,
to a heart.
yeah, yeah,
And now, where
yeah.
I war at it as a
Mm,
father and as a Christian is, honestly, would I would prefer my children live in a culture like this, where there's
mm.
blessing of ease and affluence, but yeah, I don't want them living next to the river and having to hunt for food any longer or something like that. If I could create a culture where my kids live, where there's stability and peace and ease, I would want that. But at the same time, there's the curse of it that we just are blessed to have this thought around today as believers, where God still has to rescue us from a fallen, corrupt, evil world. And that includes a world that has air conditioning and iPhones.
Right,
You know,
right. Yeah, yeah,
it's a wonderful mix of the reality in which we find ourselves, that that we have this problem, that we have this question. But I want my kids, my grandkids, to be in a place that has opportunity for employments, and if they want to learn how to do parkour, they can do parkour. But if
yeah.
you never think about God, because all you think about is parkour and movies, this is like what C.S. Lewis said in the Screw Tape Letters, where the junior demon was being trained. Look, you don't have to have spectacular wickedness. Just get him to play cards every Friday night. If that works to bring them to hell, good job. Like, that's what you need to do.
Yeah, I actually copy and pasted for, 'cause I'm teaching a class Sunday again. I used it in my class a quote from Screw Tape Letters, similar to that, just a couple of weeks ago when I was teaching Hebrews 3 or 4, I think it was. Uh, Very interesting. Yeah, there's some. You're right. I mean, it is struggling. We don't want our children, in one sense, to struggle. In another sense, you do want them to struggle, right? Because struggling is a part of growing and understanding, how we really do need God. Let me see if I got it here. It's a neat quote. C.S. Lewis speaks to the difficulty of persistence or perseverance from a tempting demon's fictional perspective. Quote, the enemy has guarded him. This is now talking to the demon, the enemy has guarded him from you through the first great wave of temptations. But if only he could be kept alive, you have time itself for your ally. The long, dull, monotonous years of middle-aged prosperity or middle-aged adversity are excellent campaigning weather. You see, it is so hard for these creatures to persevere. The routine of adversity, the gradual decay of youthful loves and youthful hopes, the quiet despair, in parentheses, hardly felt his pain, of ever overcoming the chronic temptations with which we have again and again defeated them, and the drabness with which we create in our lives, and our inarticulate resentment with which we teach them to respond to it. All this provides admirable opportunities of wearing out a soul by attrition. If, on the other hand, the middle years prove prosperous, our position is even stronger. Prosperity knits a man to the world. He feels that he is, quote, finding his place in it, while really it is finding its place in him. That is why we must often wish long life to our patients. 70 years is not a day too much for the difficult task of unraveling their souls from heaven and building up a firm attachment to the earth. It's a long quote, but
Great quote.
It's pretty cool. Yeah, I mean, that's so true, isn't it? You're just what you're saying.
Yeah.
Is that we're so attached to what we, and I'm culprit number one here, and I do believe I think about the Lord every day, but the we have everything we need right here.
Well, the Lord makes rich and the Lord makes poor, and He's created a culture of wealthy people, and we're not the only one, but I've preached
Certainly.
to soldiers and told them, if you a specialist in the Army, E4, 2-3 years into their service, is making enough money that I could say by far they're in the top 1% of the wealthiest humans that have ever lived on planet Earth.
Wow.
It's a numerical fact. You just look at the value of the dollar and you look at human history. You live better than 17th century French kings, and right. You can make 30 grand a year and say that in America. We're not the only culture.
Entitlement's not just a government term, obviously, but it's become more popular. But it is, we're entitled. Well, certainly. Right now, at Friday morning on July the 19th, pretty appropriate after 4 days of watching, some of the RNC on TV and seeing the, I know become a curse word at times, the nationalism there, which again, a lot of, speaking about God as, and prayers and things. I'm not totally trashing any of that. I'm really not. Just think, it makes you go, right? You think about, where is that balance? I think God, and we learned that back when I was the de facto missions pastor over the many years before we had, we learned that, the wealth in the U.S. churches, about 96% of it stays at home. Like 4 or 5% gets sent elsewhere overseas, right? So already you see the tendency toward we need it here, right? And so that's still the case in the church today. I don't know what the percentage is now, but still the case in the church today. And that's actually why at our church we started this years ago. It's not a biblical principle necessarily, although tithing, to give 10% of what we took in to missions that wouldn't stay at Idlewild. It was just a way of saying, God,
I love it.
We want to be generous. So 10%, is to compare to all we keep in here. But yeah, you're spot on. It's
Well, yeah, and it's so really we are saying that when your Lewis quote and those things, what sin would tempt you and me, Reno, if we had $10 million discretion today to go and blow, would be different than the sin maybe that tempts us today. Right. So the sin that tempts somebody in Papua New Guinea today is going to be different than in London. But it's the same world, flesh, and devil that's, trying to, like Lewis said there, like entangle the people in the world. Mm-hmm. And we are blessed by the Lord who created this culture and every culture, in some sense, providentially, that we can have this struggle to not forget God in our blessing. But we live in the midst of a people that, I think, to summarize all we've said thus far, as we move on, I got another question I want to ask you. We just live in a people distracted.
Mm-hmm.
And so going back to the 60s and the tech and the education and the I'm not the rock and roll scene, I'm not gonna harp on it, but I mean it's emblematic of a culture of amazing Western affluence and excess that is one thing I can look at and say, I think culturally in the 60s, we know all the violent crimes and all the everything skyrockets. That's just statistical certainty. Like the culture changed. What changed it? I could point to a few things, and I think that
Hmm.
just lasciviousness writ large did it in a major way, and it would be the same in other cultures historically, where they're destroyed from within. Is what happened, like in many cultures. Maybe that's the U.S. today. We're going to destroy ourselves from within, and its affluence and its excess. And so, just great thoughts to have as
It,
believers in the midst of a crooked and perverse generation.
it is interesting,
Yeah,
that the generation a little older than me, which we still have many at our church, um, they didn't have all the genres of music to listen to. They didn't have Christian radio stations per se necessarily. Probably had stations where maybe there were radio preachers at J. Vernon McGee, et cetera, in those days. But they did have Elvis. And it's interesting, even though they would say they didn't listen to the rock and roll, they accepted Elvis, so it's kind of interesting, one generation to the other,
yeah, yeah,
there. But, so yeah, I mean, that has a lot. The influence there is obvious on, especially when people have their phones open all the time now, or and the different music now, which is obvious. Back in my day, it was like, now you do the back, you go backwards on some of these. There was a message behind
yeah. Oh,
subliminal,
yeah,
whatever it is.
yeah.
So,
I heard
but
I heard one record
yeah,
executive say that must be demonic because nobody here knows how to do it.
yeah, yeah. So,
um, yeah,
yeah, all the above. Wow, the people, they are different. You're right. The basic human heart is the same, um, but you're right, and the gospel is the same. The applications to the gospel, I think, are even more varied now than we knew before, because technology has made applications more varied, in ways we can
yeah,
apply it to our lives. But bottom line is, each of us has to take that and and apply it to our own lives. But yeah, and distractions. It's so
yeah,
obvious now. I mean, so
yeah,
many distractions to
yeah.
stay on focus. So
Tell me
wow.
about Jesus' butterfly. I mean, it's
Yeah,
just the
yeah.
way the human heart, the mind has been shaped, and we need to be aware of it so
Yeah.
that we can, for 100 reasons, it will help if we're just even aware of it. Now, we mentioned earlier the Scopes trial, which is Tennessee, 1925. You look at the pictures, it's quite fascinating. The man was tried for teaching and was condemned for
Mm.
teaching that man descended from some sort of ape-like species 60
Mhm.
million years
Uh-huh.
ago
Uh-huh.
is the current number. I don't know if they were saying that same thing in 1925 or not, but it's some distant
Mhm.
past. And he was condemned he was tried and found guilty of saying things that were contrary to Scripture and to the mindset, in this era, in the early 20th century. Now, when I, as a modern apologist, a preacher,
Mhm. Uh-huh.
go on campus. I've done 2 videos to prove it recently on evolution, and we're going to do a third, and we're going to interact with students, and I want our teachers to come out. I want to have dialogue on campus. Listen,
Mhm.
everybody believes in evolution. And when I say everybody, I mean when you grab the student who would say, "Okay, are you a Christian or not?" Yes, no, they still believe there's truth in this claim. Now, when I think of
Mhm.
where the culture has changed between then, and this is before your time as well, but between then and now, I want to ask you how much you think the naturalist religious view, and I'm calling it that, but the naturalist view that God didn't make us a couple thousand years ago special in his image. Instead, he made us, maybe they would say, maybe God was involved. But you can explain how we got here outside of God by big bangs and natural evolution. In your
Mhm.
lifetime, do you think that that ideology has changed the American Christian church?
yeah. Again, that it would be, outside, because in my formative years up till being in my my 20s, early 20s, 23 I guess officially, but probably 22, 23, where I started actually getting into the Word of God, hearing it preached every week. I wasn't saved. So
Hmm.
I
Same as
but
me. Yeah.
I don't know that it ever really affected me personally that much. That I don't think I ever bought into evolution, because I don't think in my schooling that it was emphasized that much. This whole thing of evolving from apes and the missing links. So either I missed it, I wasn't paying attention, because or I just so as far as affecting the church, well, obviously, um, it was very interesting because we had some Bible conferences at Bellevue Baptist Church, Adrian Rogers, and they J. Sidlow Baxter was one of his favorites, an older man who's been gone for many years, I'm sure. J. Sidlow Baxter was a gap theory guy. And actually, Adrian Rogers, it turns out, was taught the gap theory at New Orleans Seminary. So now he would be, I guess, in his late 80s by now, if he was still living. So another, say, 20 years ahead of me, um, or maybe more than that in seminary, because he probably went seminary when he was younger. They taught in Southern Baptist seminaries the gap theory, because they didn't believe that the science affected. They thought the science
Mm.
was true, and that there's a lot of gaps in the theory of evolution, obviously. So it is a theory, as one of our professors at seminary said. It's the same as the the Latin word supposition, the same as the Greek word hypothesis, the same as the English word guess. And so
Yeah.
I think it did affect the church. If the pastors, solid Bible inerrantist pastors, are believing the gap theory between verse 1 and verse 2 of Genesis chapter 1, because they couldn't argue the science out of it, that did affect the church, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it had to affect the church if we think we're evolved from a lower, I mean, somehow or other. Yeah, it's just,
Yeah.
I think it could, and I didn't experience that myself, but I would think it would have had to affect the church.
Yeah, I'm just looking for, as a modern believer, like what has led to the gross denial
Mm-hmm.
of the Christian message. There's it's not out of nowhere. And so what I've experienced, or my theory, my hypothesis, my guess is really that evolution is at the core of the rot of my modern culture. The idea that you are, and it goes hand in hand with atheism most often, or at least a
Mm-hmm.
strong agnosticism. I don't know if there's a God. There might be, but I'm not sure anybody could know, kind of thing. Uh,
Right.
which of course would be a denial of every major world religion's claims. But the
Well,
general belief.
yeah, I think you nailed every one of them you mentioned so far. You've nailed them. They're so good. And it was interesting in studying Hebrews. One of the commentators was mentioning, because in Hebrews 3 and 4, the word today is used a few different times.
Yeah,
Today, do not harden your heart. Today, and the point was, the writer of Hebrews, which I kind of lean toward Paul, but I can't say for sure.
yeah,
One of the arguments against Paul is that he never mentions the high priest in any of the other writings. And so the Hebrews goes a great deal into our high priest. But one is that people think the Bible is just an ancient book of antiquity. And so the writer of Hebrews is saying to the readers then and now, us, is for today.
mm,
I think that was a kind of interesting comment there. That I thought, yeah, that makes sense.
yeah.
It's not, I mean, it is for today,
In
but
fact, he says,
putting,
for as long as it's called today, like hear
yeah,
this
yeah,
message.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Which
yeah,
we don't. Now, again, I get it, because we've been doing this 2-year Bible reading, and we're now in Judges, and going through Joshua, and Joshua's got some upside for sure. But my goodness, I could see how people who don't have the Spirit of God would look at that and go, huh?
Yeah.
kill all these people, burn their cities down. I mean, I mean, I do understand, I think, how people could go, that God is, I mean, yeah, I mean, does that make sense? I understand the difficulty if you don't see the scripture as a whole, right?
Sure.
Yeah,
Sure.
yeah, and that even said you mentioned the book that you read by Dr. Wright, or what, how it put everything in perspective for you and rocked your world, because you could take this. You mean the God of the Old Testament is the God?
Hmm.
Whoa, whoa!
Hmm.
You read through Joshua Judges and going, huh?
Well,
I
you
mean,
just brought a thought to mind of what you're saying there, of what Francis Schaeffer once said. He was asked a question like, if you had a 1 hour flight with someone and you want to share the gospel, what would you do? And his answer was something to the effect, I think that was the scenario, but the answer was something to the effect of, I'd spend 50 minutes telling him about them as a creation of the Creator, and then 10 minutes telling him about the gospel. Just seeing the disconnect
right?
in his generation
Yeah,
of secular
the
thinking.
Acts 17 sermon by Paul. Yeah, we're got to start,
Yeah.
start at the beginning,
Crops
right?
and yeah, God gave
Right, yeah,
crops and
and I think
seasons
in
and
this, I'm sure you studied missiology some. That became a thing of, hey, we can't go into other countries and start with Jesus. We got
mm,
to start with who God is, and
yeah.
creation, and who we are, and you got to build up to that. Yeah, it makes
Yeah.
sense. Yeah.
So technology, I'm saying like two things here. We said evolution and tech we talked around as maybe some of the leading things that we want to remind people as Christians that you still need the same Jesus, whether you're a poor guy in, Afghanistan or a rich guy in America. And
Mhm.
so the same gospel is going to apply everywhere, and we have just different challenges, if you will, different fields to play in. But I think evolution is at the core of the sexual revolution, devolution, we could say,
Yeah,
and now
yeah.
the radical trans LGBT insanity that many people are not as many as those in the camp want everybody to think for sure, but many people just are confused about this. I think evolution is at the core of it.
Mhm.
The idea that maybe, we're just maybe there isn't a Jesus and a creator and all of that. And so I really find that strangely bondage over people, but they find it as liberation and
Right.
affluence
Yeah.
technology. So maybe the mix of these two things from your generation to mine, we can honestly say are things that have changed us and created the milieu we're going to interact with today. Would you agree?
Yeah, oh yeah, did really agree. And you look at all those truths being right there in the first, 11 chapters of Genesis, really, when you come right down to
Mm.
it. Many of the things all kind of comes down to these core foundational beliefs, that
Oh,
we're given, because there's so much more than we got in 11 chapters of Genesis. There's so much more going on, but what we've been given, those basics of, foundational principles, all those are under attack, and have been under attack for a long time, right? So, yeah,
yeah.
so
What did you think? You weren't a Christian then. What did you think when in 1973? This is really the third area, and we're rounding toward third base right now in our talk. I don't want
right.
to keep you on all day, even though I could keep you on all day. I'd love to. As we're getting toward third here, in 1973, you weren't a believer. 51 years ago, the United States Supreme Court essentially legalized what I would call the slaughter of unborn children, calling it choice, which is still the rhetoric the side uses. A woman's right to choose. And if we just ask to do what, then it comes to the same problem. But would you say that that was as influential as I think it was? I would say this marked a pivotal moment of depravity in American culture. So we could talk World War II's end, Vietnam. You come through it and you're right out of it, right? You're getting into the Roe era. You've come through the Scopes monkey trial way 50 years prior. And I'm trying to link things up because ideas don't come out of nowhere. People don't come out of nowhere. Would you say that Roe was like a huge? Everybody was talking about it. It was a big thing in 1973. Was it a big on everybody's lips?
As a sophomore, junior in college, I don't think it was
Okay.
in my world. This is my world. I don't know if
But I mean, that was Georgia Tech. That was a secular university.
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah,
Um, yeah, I mean, but no, I agree with your conclusion that it's a process that
yeah,
began before Scopes Monkey, obviously, but certainly that process just carried out all the way to the point where now that life is not and it goes against total biblical principles
culture of
of
death. Yeah,
sanctity of life, and really the United States Constitution as well, which life is number one.
yeah,
Liberty and the
absolutely.
pursuit of happiness. You can't if you don't have life, you don't have liberty and pursuit of happiness. So if and so now, of course, we didn't have DNA back then, but as much as you heard people spouting off science about evolution and about climate, global, it used to be global warming, now climate change, which, okay, yeah, it gets cold in the winter and hot in the summer, yeah, this type of thing, which is in the Bible as well. As much as you heard about science there, you don't hear anything about science concerning abortion because science has
Mhm.
proven beyond a shadow of doubt, God
From
already said it,
conception.
that
From conception.
everybody's different. Your children are different than you. You
Yep.
have, 99 point something percent the same DNA, but it is different. And so that baby in the womb is different than the mother. It's another life.
Yeah.
Science has proven that,
Right.
again, God already said it. So science, but, and, again, is another, it's just the dominoes
Yeah.
begin to fall. And
You know,
yeah.
if you think of how Satan brings a man from Christ, screw tape, think through the thoughts there. It's the small incremental, the war of attrition. It's the sometimes seemingly subtle things that are the best. In fact, if you read Screw Tape, it was such a phenomenal book, the Screw Tape Letters, C.S. Lewis. If you read the book, he's like, be careful not to do something so drastic to wake your client up. Like be subtle. That's the surest way to hell. And culturally, if I think of America as a human being, like what contributed to bringing my people to a place today where if you mention that Jesus is not pro LGBT, PPPF, BQAI, he's out. For the majority of people, if he's not cool with that, I'm not cool with him. Like something brought us here, and I'm
Yeah,
saying,
to the point where even
yeah,
spiritual warfare wise, in the Western culture, because Satan was much more subtle in demonic activity than it appeared he was in other third world countries where they're much more,
yeah,
worshiping idols. And this
yeah,
we have idols, but they're out of stone. But much more out and open there. It's getting more open in our culture now because
yep.
we have obviously open ourselves up to all
Well, the
these different
RNC
things.
just has the Hindu woman praying to a false demon up on the
Really,
platform.
I didn't hear that.
Oh, it
Yeah,
was
yeah.
like, yeah, some Indian woman prayed to Wagru, something openly, and everybody's like, yay. And then they had some Jewish guys that I guess are, Hasidic, opposed to Jesus, Jews singing like a rap song. And they're just politically speaking, that's very wise because they're going to win a lot of votes this way. But for me, looking at it, I'm going, it's not that conservatism is Christianity, but darn,
Yeah,
open.
I
Just to
know.
your point, that open worship to certain things may be where it is today.
Right, right. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So
Yeah, yeah. And
going,
unfortunately, politically, we're in this. I dealt with zeros and ones in the computer world, right? But we have a binary choice. That's all we've got in our
yeah.
country politically. So you got what you got. But yeah. So
Well, I wish you'd run for president, but I don't
yeah,
know.
yeah, right. Yeah,
I don't know how well we do in an office like that, but yeah, you gotta pick your thing there. So going and the last area I want to look at. So I think we're agreeing that certain things, lead to today, and you've seen it in your 70 plus years of living that America as a culture, and again, I'm thinking about it as a Christian in America, not just trying to get my finger on the pulse of people because I care what the political polls say or something. But as a believer, We've really gotten to a place where we need to understand these things because it's the mission field, if you're called to America, to which you're going. So if you're going to go to Saudi Arabia, you need to understand not to address a woman, openly on the street without her husband. And if you're going to go and share the gospel at your local Starbucks, you need to understand that the people you're speaking to are usually depraved, sexually immoral. They probably have murdered one of their children in abortion or been involved in it. 1 in 4 is the statistics on it. That they are very wealthy and distracted to Jesus. They've not had a solid hour of thought on him in 20 years. And they probably believe they descended from some ape-like ancestor. Like this is the general person you can expect to run into in your city. And to know that and to think along these lines is crucial to knowing that we have to bring them the same gospel. You're a sinner. You need a savior. Here he is. He died and rose again. Repent, put your trust in him. And on the day of judgment, you go free because of someone else's righteousness having been granted to you. There's our message. And I don't care if you're a czar in Russia or you are a pauper in America. This is the gospel, and we want you to believe it. So I'm thinking through these things because ideas don't come out of nowhere. And here I am, you've seen and experienced, really the changes that I look at and go, okay, what happened in the 60s? I mean, though you weren't converted at that time exactly, right? We talked about that. You've seen them. And so I'm trying to see if I'm reading some things at least correctly on it. Culturally and while we're here. So to the church, you're 50 years you've been a believer, right?
Close to it. Yeah.
Close to it. Okay. If I'm doing the swag math there off my top of my head. How is church different? From when you first went?
And again, I've been in a Southern Baptist church since I was saved, First Baptist Church of Atlanta and then Bellevue, et cetera. So certainly yeah, it was much more, my goodness. And I'm sure even back in those days, I didn't really know it because I was a brand new believer, but there was a lot more culturally within the church. It wasn't that long before that probably African Americans or darker skinned people would have been allowed into a Bellevue Baptist church or,
okay.
So that wasn't that much before my time, probably still in that realm that, kind of.
I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah.
Yeah. Missionary Baptist church or whatever over here. And, so that of course has been an issue in the Southern Baptist Convention over the years. But church was a lot more formal, there was, I think even, our former pastor, Ken Whitten, which would have been, was already retired by the time you came on staff.
Yeah, I met him one time.
Yeah, he would say, wow, we all had the same sermons back in those days. The pastor was Dr. Stanley was our source of authority, right? Adrian Rogers was our source of authority. We didn't have umpteen zillion podcasts we could listen to here, there, and every place else. So it became
technology changed us.
Yeah, your place of Christian authority versus and unfortunately, what happened there was, I think, and kind of falls into the other line of all the things you've been saying about our culture, is that you had your faith on Sunday, and then you had the real world Monday through Saturday. And so it tended to compartmentalize your Christianity to one day a week, and that I think that's kind of tends to be what happened. Okay, but we go to school on Monday, we go to work on Monday. We don't, so it's but I go to church on Sunday. I put my suit on and coat and tie and act a certain way, and then Monday I watch hours of TV with all kinds of innuendos and storylines that would be against biblical.
You're talking about watching Disney.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Yeah.
Nowadays, exactly. Watch Disney.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So the compartmentalization of things, you're saying today it's maybe the preachers are speaking better about it, if I'm hearing you right, whereas back then it was just sort of not that the preachers were preaching we should compartmentalize, but
we do. I don't think I think we are going to be more like Bereans now.
Okay.
And I think we're being encouraged to be more like Bereans now and to get into the word for ourselves. Yeah, I think that's what you're trying to do, right? So,
Yeah. Yeah.
well, yeah, I think that's encouraged by Pastor Edgar for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
And, yeah, so that's just because I stand up here, and even I'm sure the books you're talking about, even in Designed to Lead, the point they made in Designed to Lead was that God's right here in this room, just like he's, in church and where you are at work,
Yeah.
where you are, the Holy Spirit's with you. There's not a sacred, and the term I learned when I was a young preacher is, okay, the man of God opens the book of God, which is the Bible, and stands behind the sacred desk, which is the pulpit. Well, it's no necessarily more of a holy place than your study there or your bedroom or what, as I'm
Yeah.
saying,
Preaching to people in a
I
sacred pew
understand the
who go
point
to a
behind it,
sacred
but
car. Yeah.
yeah, but it's 24/7 in Christianity,
Okay.
and not that we all live it, we don't live it, close to perfectly, but yeah.
Right.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. I think
I think
Sherry
that's
and
what we got.
Lydia.
I think that's what the other generations have to see, is that we live by a set of values outside of just Sunday morning, and the values are, somewhat consistent in our lives. Consistency is a very difficult mark to reach, obviously, total consistency, but I certainly don't reach that. But that's what they need to see, is that, we really do have values, that we do love God and we do love people,
Well, and
and
if
so,
you're not reaching that level, Pastor Reno, then let me tell you, you're an excellent faker
yeah,
because
right.
I have seen the blessing
I'm
you've been.
not there yet.
I've seen the blessing you've been to Idlewild and to so many. So I know you're not faking. I know what you mean, and I think Sherry and Lydia, our wives, are closer to Jesus than us. But we're all
Yeah,
works. We're
exactly.
all
No
works in
doubt about
progress.
that.
Yeah, we're all works in progress. So, I mean, the church has changed in some ways for the better, you're saying, in the fact that, you look at what is, the mode of communication today. This is one aspect. It's better where preachers are just saying, look, when you leave here, or,
Mhm.
it's the Lord is with you, be with you everywhere you are. That's just kind of preached a little more,
I think so. Yeah.
understood a little
Yeah.
more. Great. I mean, that's encouraging, and what we want to see. So, divorce rates among Christians are somewhere around 23%, depending on which poll you go to, and it's comparable to the outside world. But it's kind of the last question I have in my notes to ask you about. And it's, my thought goes around. Have you ever heard that song? Came out in 1985 from the Judds, and it was called "Grandpa, Tell Us About the Good Old Days." You remember that song?
Yeah, I do recall that. Yeah.
Beautiful song. Like I cried when I first heard it. And I'll be honest with you, it wasn't
Uh,
long ago. It was like 3 or 4 years
uh,
ago. I heard this song for the first time, and it was beautiful. And I actually teared up. Like I was like, So the reason I bring it up, like some of the lyrics go, Grandpa, tell me about the good old days. Sometimes it feels like this world's gone crazy. Grandpa, take me back to yesterday when the line between right and wrong didn't seem so hazy. Did lovers really fall in love to stay and stand beside each other come what may? And it's a beautiful song. You think of these girls like, Grandpa, tell me about the good old days. Now,
mm,
what I'm trying to ask in this question, I'm getting to, it takes me a minute to frame questions sometimes. I apologize. I'm tempted to honestly think, Reno, that back when you were first converted, like everybody was a Christian. Like, everything was just great. Or Christians today, apologists on opposite sides of the argument, they want to say things like, well, we need to get back to the apostolic church. And in the apostolic church, there were heresies and schisms and liars and heretics. In the second century, that was true. And the third century, it was true when Jesus was preaching.
yeah,
People
sure,
were
sure.
disagreeing,
Mm,
right? So there never
right.
was a good old day, like when
No.
when when the lines were so clearly drawn, and so in an age of skepticism in which I've been raised, I'm reaching out to you and I'm asking you: is the Judd song legit?
Y-
Is it?
y- Yeah. No, I don't think it probably is. I mean,
So
I do
yeah,
think there was because of the factors you mentioned we've been talking about here. Yeah, there's a more acceptance. I mean, my parents were divorced in 1961.
yeah,
Obviously that was not a normal that was now, so yeah, I'd say certainly because of the culture's decline and evolution and other things that we have getting away from the Bible. Yeah, that certainly has led to the view of marriage, which of course now can be man and man, woman. The government took over marriage a long time ago. I've said that over and over again. I said the church doesn't own marriage anymore. The government owns it. They give you a piece of paper when you're married. They give you a piece of paper when you're divorced. The question was asked many times. Well, what if the government says you have to do homosexual marriage? And I say, well, then go get your piece of paper down at the courthouse, and we'll do a covenant ceremony. We won't sign any. There's no reason I have to sign a marriage license. These days, a notary public can do that. So yeah, I think it has affected marriage to a degree. I think the greater issue for us to keep marriage, because it still is a popular thing to do, is making sure our young people are prepared for marriage. And the other things we've talked about are a part of that. Understanding the Word of God, understanding their worldview, being understanding what it means to have a job and to live. All those things that parents need to prepare their children, both boys and girls growing up, to be one day married. I think maybe that we take that for granted and let the schools do
mm,
most of that now instead of doing that at home. And because if we are developing young men and young women who are solid and they're still going to have problems, right? Adult children have adult
right,
problems.
right,
I've discovered that a long time ago. But if they have a solid foundation under them, then I think in the church that percentage, yes, things are still going to happen. We've known people, Sherry and I both have. I can name a few names where, especially a woman marries a guy thinking he's in the church, thinking he's a good guy, and he turns around and has affairs. There's those things that
yeah,
happen.
yeah.
But I think it's all being raising up young men and young women in the Word, living out their faith. They're going to be better husbands, better wives, and they're going to go back to the good old days where marriage is, a permanent commitment of one man and one woman freely and totally committed to each other for life, as we say in the vows, so
Yeah,
type of thing.
yeah.
So yeah, yeah,
So wrapping all this up, I mean, really, we got a few minutes left here. There maybe never was a golden age, even before the internet or before evolution was popular. It's only a 165-year-old idea, or the sexual revolution, which really got to the fever pitch it's at right now, like 10 seconds ago, right? Oh wait, 5 seconds ago. We
mhm,
tend to think, the technology, iPhones, people are people, and we have the privilege of being rescued by God from a sinful world. And that would have been true had we had this talk only
right,
possible via candlelight, 300 years ago. It's as true today.
true, right,
So for me, or for any of us watching this that are, praying about ministry and doing ministry in light of all that we talked about, or irrelevant to anything we've talked about so far, close us out with just some thoughts on what to focus on in ministry in the church, where we can get it right. So you have the government, you got the church, you got the family. And those are the three spheres that I think God has, in fact, biblically, I could
right,
say that He's created. And so maybe just in the church or family, we're not necessarily talking government or something. Just remind us in all of your experience, what is the main, if you will, the main thing of
right.
moving ahead.
We do need to be drawing together in community. I mean, and of course, a church like our size, we live far. Even said we could be 25 miles away from each other and going to the same church. That was back in the day when there were neighborhood churches. That was unheard of. You wouldn't drive that
Interesting.
far to come to church.
Interesting thought. Yeah.
So distance is a factor. So what we have to do to make up for that is to have community within our church, because we're going to have more persecution. I mean, there's no doubt about that. You know, how soon it's coming, we don't know, but it's going to come. You know, whether I'll still be alive, it very well could be. You know, I mean, it could come that quickly. So we have to be, that's what Jesus said, I give you a new commandment that you love one another just as I have loved you. Now he added on just as I have loved you, a little higher bar to set.
Hmm.
But he said it's not a new commandment. It was an old commandment, but now there's a new emphasis to it we have to love what we need each other. And I think the book just read Side by Side by Ed Welch, and he wrote the word when people are big and God is small. But Ed Welch said there's two parts of the book: we are needy and we are needed. You know, and I think that we all have that understanding in the church that we all are needy, but we all are needed. God need each one of us. I think we'll build that community to help each other walk through these challenges in life, which all the things you talked about are just bearing in on us. We're in the world. We're not of it. We're in it. We're certainly right in the middle of it. And so I think that's what we got to have in ministry. It's going to be a lot of one-on-one and making sure no one gets left behind. You know, even in the book of Numbers, it said the Amalekites, they picked off the ones that were, you know, that they picked off the ones that were behind, you know, that didn't stay. And I think that's going to be, you know, if we're not really surrounded in community, we are going to get picked off. You know, there's no question about that. You know, so I mean, I think that just comes to my mind. She asked that question. So
Yeah. No, it's wonderful to hear, because I can honestly say those are the very things that I'm praying about, like looking ahead and how we baton the truth from your generation to, you know, through mine to the next, that community and that need of creating it. How do we do it? Where does my, as a minister, passion and joy meet, and all of that stuff that people think about to follow and answer that call? But I want to create that community. I want to see that done. And I have some ideas on doing it, like any of us hopefully do and want to see. But thank you for this talk. I mean, I really appreciate, you know, just all the insight. And I'm going to, you know, create like I said, a little intro video to this and put on the front to have you on. But I mean, 40 years of ministry and going strong with you and with Sherry, your wife. And, you know, just your testimony in our church is exactly what any of us could pray to the Lord to be faithful, found doing in, you know, for me in 40 more years, or anybody in twice, you know, that amount of time. So I just want to thank you for your time and coming on and talking with us here. I hope it's not the last time we do it.
All right. Bye. Look forward to working with you for sure in the future here, for sure. Yeah.
Thank you, brother.
All right, brother.